Almighty God, maker of all things, you've brought us in safety to this new day. We ask that you would preserve us by your mighty power. You would protect us from the assaults of the enemy, and that you would direct us to the purposes for which you have created us. We ask that we would be led through that by your Son, Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen. Well, it is a good morning. I'm just happy to be sitting down with y'all, and the y'all, 7 years in South Carolina, with y'all. The y'all includes Bishop Ken Ross this morning, and we're really happy to have you here, Ken. Ken is our bishop, but also he's a friend. Ken has walked with me through some very difficult things in my life. Sorry to give you extra work to do. And he's been a friend and a pastor to me in his role as a bishop. And so I have a high level of trust and appreciation for him. That's worth just naming. You don't always get that in a pastor. You don't always get that in a bishop, and I'm very grateful for it. But we're here nevertheless this morning to just grill him. Deacon Rob said, "Is this the grill the bishop session?" You're in the right place in the right time. One thing I've learned about Ken over the years is, he's good for it. So don't worry about it. If there's anything that you're thinking to yourself, I don't know, is this awkward to ask? Look, you know me at this point. Go for the awkward questions. I'm good for that. Ken is good for it too. And so I kind of want to just turn it over. But first, Ken, that's how I'd like to introduce you. But what sort of data points or anything important would you like to add to that for introduction before we do Q&A?
Probably nothing that I can think of.
Great. We're efficient. Then in that case, what do you all want to ask the bishop? And I don't think about it. It might take a while for maybe we'll start from this side over here. Mary Ann, yes.
Where do you live? Where are you at? What's your location as an office? How are your relationship? Just a little background.
Yeah, I live in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Moved there at the end of 2001 to plant a church. I did what's called a parachute drop, where you come into an area where nobody's asking you to plant a church, and there's no funding, and you just start. And the Lord blessed that. So I have lived in Colorado Springs since the end of 2001. We deeply enjoy it there. I am married. This coming March, my wife and I will celebrate 40 years of marriage, for which we're deeply thankful for. We have two sons who are 34 and 36. The older one's married, and we have 3 grandkids. So that's a little bit. Is that helpful?
Yeah, just kind of who you are.
Maybe I'll say this, and Aaron knows this. I turned down being a bishop 3 times. Why would I leave the local church where ministry happens?
This is the good stuff here.
Yeah,
it is. Genuinely.
And when I finally said yes, I said as long as I can remain rector of my church. Because why would I, again? So I tried for a couple of years to be rector of a large growing church. When I left, we had 500 on a Sunday, 253 of them were 5th grade and below. A vibrant church, and realizing I can't actually be the lead pastor of a large growing church and also be a bishop. Too many easily 100-hour weeks, and you just do everything poorly. And so I was. You
were the children's director too, right?
That's right. Yeah. I went in thinking if this whole bishop thing isn't going to work, I'll just retire being a bishop and continue in the church. But as my wife and I prayed, it was like, dang, I'm actually supposed to let the church go and stay in this role. So,
and I'm glad you did. Thank you. Who has another question? That was it. Thanks. It's been good. Enjoy the nibbles.
Coffee, there's nibbles.
No, I know they'll percolate. Jean, help us out. What do you got?
Welcome, Bishop Ken. Wondering what's rising to the surface on your heart in this particular season of either your job or the church or Anglicanism or however as broad as I can read it. What's rising to your heart of this?
And do you mind just restating the question for anyone who hears?
Yeah, let me see if I heard it correctly with my hearing aids. Saying what's rising in my heart as I think about Anglicanism or the diocese or church overall.
Or just whatever you prefer.
Or whatever.
Whatever is
However,
rising to your heart.
what's rising in my heart for your life? No, I'm just kidding.
If you've got a call on Jean's life, I want to hear it.
things. One of the things that that I've become really aware of is that the younger generations have an openness to spiritual things that we have not seen in decades and decades. A tremendous openness and a tremendous hunger. Now, just spiritual things in general. Right? My generation and generation before and generation after were pretty closed and hostile to spiritual things. Leave me alone, I've got my life. But there really is, all the studies, and I've seen it anecdotally, all the studies are really just showing there is a tremendous spiritual hunger. And so there's tremendous opportunity, and we're seeing the fruit. I think there's something that the Anglican Church offers. It is a sweet spot in that, because we're solid on the authority of Scripture, the proclamation of the gospel. We're actually rooted in rhythms that have shaped the church for centuries. And that hunger is also a hunger for something that's rooted and not just the latest thing. So there's been a tremendous blessing in the Anglican Church overall in the States as a place for that. We've also had the blessing, so we see people coming to faith, but also a lot of people who are have had bad church experiences.
Why are you gesturing toward me?
Yeah. Some have had really awful pastors.
Moving to the other side.
And I'm sure you've heard the term, people hit deconstruction. They start to deconstruct their faith. The Anglican Church has turned out to be a place where people on that path of deconstruction, if they find it, we can stop that journey. And they can be sort of anchored into the truth of the gospel and who Jesus is again. So I would say, watching those two things, I'm deeply thankful. So that's sort of large picture. I think for the diocese, certainly those things are a key piece. We're also just grown tremendously fast, and so we are trying to figure out systems and structures and ways to actually keep pace with their growth. So we have a new suffragan bishop being consecrated at our gathering in February. And what is a suffragan? Anglicans have to have a weird name for everything. A suffragan bishop is a priest who's made a bishop for the role of assisting. So it's basically another word for an assisting bishop. But if somebody's already a bishop and they come to assist, they're assisting bishops. If we make them a bishop to be an assistant, they're suffragan bishops. So
we just got one less than a year ago.
Yeah.
And a second one is being consecrated in February. In addition.
Yeah, so the goal in Ben Fisher, I think was here last year.
Ben Fisher, it might be a little confusing because Bishop Ken was here for Chelsea's ordination. Bishop Ben was the suffragan who was here a year ago, roughly.
The goal in getting a suffragan is we actually want our bishops, assisting bishops, to be rooted in their local congregation still. So he remains the rector of his church. He just travels one weekend a month for me to do what I'm doing here. And the idea was to give me some breathing space, so I would maybe travel 3 out of 4 weeks in a month. And but we've grown enough that I took July off, and between July and Christmas, I've had 1 weekend where I'm not doing a church visit. So we need another one, and hopefully that'll give us some space.
How far is your territory?
So the question, in case you didn't hear it, was how far is your territory?
I failed geography. So we are called Diocese of the Rocky Mountains, and generally we are sort of Colorado and west, like all the way west to Hawaii. So we planted 4 churches in Hawaii. We're getting ready to start a 5th. So you could say I go all the way to Hawaii, and you're probably aware of this if you've ever been. Like Denver to Hawaii is for me the same amount of time as flying Denver to London. Hawaii is the most remote island chain in the world.
So that's the next church plant then?
Yeah, that's
London.
right, London. We're going London. But
They
I
already have
also,
them
Rocky Mountains, I also have a church in New Jersey, one in Upper East Side Manhattan, one in Jacksonville, Florida, a couple in Minneapolis, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Why would that be, Bishop Ken? Why would there be churches that far away that would be a part of our diocese? I can answer the question, but they want to hear from you.
Oh, no, I'd like to hear your answer.
The answer is this is a very healthy diocese, and you don't take that for granted. And there are people with other dioceses locally around them that they don't have either a strong sense of affinity connection with, or that they, various reasons, find themselves saying, I can't be here. And they look around and they go, this is unusual that you would find yourself in a church structure where you would technically have the option to choose your bishop and diocese. And they take great delight in that unusual opportunity, and they say, here's a diocese that is really healthy and that has the values that I have and stacked in the way that I stack them, and would be a safe place for me to find refuge and grow and continue to thrive in ministry. And they come knocking on Ken's door. And so this is how we've ended up with centralized around Colorado. But the outliers, now we're not in that category quite. We predate a lot of the structures that exist now in the Anglican Church in North America as a province. But that's how you end up with a lot of outliers. I think it's a very healthy thing, but maybe not like something you would plan as a structure.
No, not planned. Right now, we have a couple of churches that are looking to join our diocese from outside of Anglicanism. And so we've done that a number of times.
But becoming Anglican in that process, to
But
be clear.
becoming Anglican in that process. And then I can say in the last 3 years, I've turned away 5 churches that wanted to join our diocese. And part of that is, I don't need more churches. We love planning. We're a church planning diocese, and church plans tend to be one of the best ways to reach the unchurched. But for me, the motivation is I always want a church to be in the context where it's going to thrive the most. And so sometimes, actually, we're not a fit, which means you wouldn't thrive being in our diocese. But here's a diocese that I think you would really fit in well, that you would thrive.
Let's go with Heather, and then we'll do Barb next. Heather.
My question is, if you're traveling so much, how are you able to be part of and connected and plugged in with a local parish with your wife?
I'm not.
And so what do you do in lieu of that?
So, a couple of things. I don't visit churches around Christmas and Easter, and so I go with her to church. But part of it is that
I love that the bishop's at Christmas and Easter church.
Maybe an
I'm
occasional
gonna get some
other
mileage out of
time.
that
But part of it is that we have our own sort of rhythms that we really engage in, the two of us, and then we also have a small group that we're really active in during the week. And so I'm not completely disconnected. And then I have my own, every morning I get up at 4 so that I could have an hour to an hour and a half of time in Bible reading and prayer and journaling, and then do an hour on the elliptical. I find that physical and spiritual piece is really helpful. It keeps me, at least the appearance of sane. And so the rhythms, and then rhythms my wife and I have daily, but then also that engaging with a group of people.
And I'll add to that and just say it is a sort of thing you think about it when you hear that travel schedule, but in reality that is a challenge for all clergy, in the sense that, as a rector, I don't worship with my wife and children on Sundays. I don't sit with them. That's years deep for us. So you do have to figure out if this is kind of the sacrifice we're going to make, how do we make it good for us spiritually and as a family as well? So yeah.
I get that, but this is a whole level different.
Preach,
than
sister. It's a
that.
whole nother level. I'm not denying that.
You're in the same community with your wife and your kids.
And I'm just saying, it's all in that same direction. And yeah, I think when you become a bishop, you have to have healthy stuff in place and reckon with that in a different way.
And it really is also, for me, part of the desire that if I could once a month worship with my wife,
That'd be awesome.
that's a gift.
Yeah.
And this is part of why we're adding suffragan bishops. And more than that, just Bishop Ken alluded to putting in place systems and structures. We're also hiring staff in the diocese and incrementally, I think that load gets lowered off of Ken. I would love for you to be able to worship with Sally once a month. That sounds great. Sally's a wonderful person too. So, Barb, you are next.
When you're planting churches, do you look at the geographical area west of the Rockies?
Generally speaking, we are planting churches mostly west of the Rockies, or Colorado and west, but we've done a few that aren't, and some of that's because we have churches in an area. So right now, our church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, is actually looking at a couple of possible church plants, one in Fargo, North Dakota, right? But we have churches, our churches tend to be highly missional, and in that, they tend to generate those kinds of things. And so there are places where we have a presence that we might plant out of that presence. But for me, that tends to be much more in a place where there isn't an Anglican church, is generally how I try to look at that. Now, that's actually just to not hurt anybody else's feelings, because the Baptists has figured this out. Like, more Baptist churches doesn't make things harder for people. You have more brand recognition. The more Anglican churches you have, the more people know it, the more people start showing up. So having more Anglican churches in an area isn't actually a threat, it's a benefit. But not every bishop feels that way, so I'm always very cautious, and I want to try to do things well in that. But like in Colorado Springs, we have two other dioceses who have churches in Colorado Springs, where I live. And for me, when they said we'd love to plant Colorado Springs, I'm like, that's great. What can I do to help you? Because you're going to reach people I'll never reach. And we could have 10 times as many Anglican churches right now, and we would be in good shape. We're on the same team.
My analogy for that is my parents live near a Starbucks, and if you stand outside the Starbucks, it's in the parking lot. It shares the parking lot with a QFC. The QFC has inside it a Starbucks. The QFC is in kind of like a strip mall sort of thing, and 2 suites over from it is another Starbucks. So you are looking at 3 Starbucks all around you. But what they've understood is actually, it's not competitive. You're building brand recognition and whatnot. So I love
I just
that.
have to tell a quick story. You would probably appreciate more than anybody else. So my dearest friend for 35 years is another bishop named Pat Barnum, who you know.
He's been a pastor to me over the years too.
So Thad loves coffee, and we were visiting together in Atlanta to go do some bishop stuff, and so we were going to go visit somebody, and Thad's trying to get directions to drive there, and it's just not clicking. And finally, the guy said, "Listen, okay, drive down this street till you see a Starbucks, turn left. Then go to the next Starbucks, turn right." He gave him directions by Starbucks, and Thad was locked in. Like, oh yeah, I can get there.
Yes, that's familiar. Absolutely. So, back to Barb's question, our diocese is not trying to plant churches in Manhattan, for example, but is taking churches like that under its wing. But when it turns its attention to focus on where do we initiate church plants, generally it is going to be, I think, largely Colorado, but yes, many places west of Colorado.
Yeah, in the ACNA, there are 3 types of dioceses. So one type is the one people are most familiar with, that they're purely geographic, and they only have churches within that geography. There are geographic dioceses that claim the geographic diocese, like the Diocese of Pittsburgh, and he's a friend, so I'm not saying bad about him, right? We're Pittsburgh, a geographic diocese. We'll just ignore that we have a church in Nashville, we have one in Chicago, we have one in Colorado, or in Fort Collins, Colorado. So there are purely geographic dioceses, but many of them actually also have outliers. The other kind of diocese that you have in the ACNA are what are called affinity dioceses, which means you're not held together by geography, but you're held together by affinity. That can be relational. It could be, like in our case, that some of the affinity that holds us together is a strong gospel focus, We are highly geared towards church planting, so we tend to put half of the income the diocese brings in back into planting churches, and there are dioceses that want to do that, but they have no money to do that. So we make very intentional decisions about what we fund and don't fund, and staff we hire, so we can actually put a lot of money out back to church planting. But then also our connection with Rwanda is very much a defining thing for us. So there can be things that are theological, that are relational, that form affinity. And then there are what are called regional dioceses, which technically we are, which is sort of a hybrid. I mean, that they say basically you have a large geographic area, and within our large geographic area, you have churches that are part of you by affinity. Now, again, we push the boundaries of regional. We're probably sort of regional affinity, since we have beyond our geographic area.
I think that's accurate too, yeah. Who else has a question?
If you were out here, what question would you ask?
A question would you ask of us, or if he was out here, if he was in the seats, what would he want to ask of the bishop sitting up there? It's a fun question.
How can I help you retire? No, I'm just kidding.
You don't get to retire.
Go to heaven.
Yeah.
Here's your- here's your path.
That is the best retirement. Probably for me, the thing that would come, and this reflects our Rwandan heritage, is I'd want to hear I'd say, tell me your story of coming to faith. So when I travel in Africa, they always want to hear your testimony. And so for me, it would be like, either how'd you come to faith, or how do you see God at work, or that's the kind of thing I would ask. Which is similar to
Yeah, next question.
Are you going to answer that?
Yeah.
I answered the question.
You spoke too soon. I was only at part A.
The rest of Bob's question is, yeah, we would love to hear your story of coming to faith. We actually, I mean, part of where we're at too with bringing two congregations together into one church is there's just a lot of people who they don't know much about you. So
I feel like I don't know much about me.
that's the truth, right? We're always learning. Okay, I'm gonna get some more coffee because this is a bit of a story. Go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to make it short. I did not grow up in a Christian home or anything remotely Christian home. In fact, I could say I was born in California. That might be enough. Probably any kind of new age or cult thing you've heard of, I experienced growing up. I did not grow up in a stable home. So I have birth parents, step parents, adopted parents, foster, any iteration of parents you've heard of, I have. I did not grow up in a safe home. So most of those iterations were abusive. I was sharing the other day, one of my earliest memories, I have a clear memory, and that was my birth mother told me I wasn't quite almost four, of climbing onto the counter in the kitchen to open the cupboard to get the jar of peanut butter because I was running away and I knew I needed food. And what she told me years later was that the police found me 2 miles away. I mean, I was running away. I was like, this is not a safe place, I'm going. And then I bit and kicked and scratched and didn't want to go back. So I didn't grow up in a safe context. So I grew up in the sense of you don't trust anybody to meet your needs because nobody's going to. You've got to take care of yourself. And so for me, it was always very much like I am in control, I'm in charge, I don't need anything from anybody, my life is good. And I also grew up in, both my birth parents are insanely smart. My maternal grandfather, to give you an idea, got his PhD from Harvard at the age of 19. My birth mother was like that. My birth father, Caltech, Mensa, chess master, everything you can say, he's brilliant. So I also grew up with a sense of that being smart, your mind is God. When I was 13, 14, I was living back with my father, long story, and we were in Denver at that point, he was in a cult called Ananda Marga, which came out of India. This is the way he told the story. He passed a couple of years ago. That he was at a Wednesday night meeting for this group, Ananda Marga, And a guy walks into the Wednesday night meeting wanting to talk his own son out of the cult. But he turns to my dad and says, there's a church you should go visit. And told him the name of the church and where it was. My dad like, yeah, whatever. He had never been in a church. So his father was Orthodox Jew. And his mother was Rosicrucian, which is a weird cult thing. And actually, when they married, my grandfather's family buried him because he married a Gentile. I mean, it was cut out. So my father had never been in a church in his life. Never stepped. He had no concept of any of that. And he woke up Sunday morning and he's like, what the hell? I've never been to a church. Maybe I'll go see what that's about. And he's driving up the hill to the church. It's in Denver, where the church is. And as he's driving up the hill to the church, God sovereignly meets him in the car. Without hearing the gospel from anybody, he bursts into tears, gives his life to Jesus. Walks into the church saying, I don't know what just happened to me. And he was weeping, and like, God just met me in the car, and I realized my need for God, and Jesus met me in the car. And they were dear, faithful people who loved Jesus. It was an Episcopal church which never had seen a conversion in their probably 50 years of experience.
That's why God did it in the car?
In the car. So they loved him well into the faith, but they did not quite know what to do. Like, what do you do? Baptists are the ones who do conversions. We just get them afterwards. That's how the Episcopal church used to operate. So for a couple of years, he kept on trying to get me to go to church with him, and he really had no authority or place in my life. And so I just kept on saying no, not interested. And the other thing that you know is that when we are rescued, we're made new creations, absolutely. But it doesn't mean that our personality changes. And my father was brilliant and relationally very deficient. I've often wondered if he was on the spectrum, actually. Just incredibly brilliant, very relationally defective. Anyway, when I was 16, he kept on bugging me to go to this weekend youth camp. And I'm like, nope, not going, nope, not going. And he kept on bugging me. I finally said, listen, I will go if when I come back, you promise to never talk to me about this stuff ever again. And he said, deal. So I went. I went, I wasn't seeking anything. I had no sense of need. I wasn't searching for anything. I got my first job at 14 because I had to buy my own clothes and take care of, I was just very, for me, competent and you take care of yourself. So I went to the weekend and I just need to endure this, cause a little trouble, maybe meet somebody cute, that's all I'm thinking. And Saturday night, I'm sitting there because I had to, and there was a gospel presentation. And I couldn't even tell you what was said. All of a sudden, I didn't have the language of sin. It was like, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's something deeply wrong with me. Oh, I think I need God. I just remember weeping. And I actually had a vision at that point. I'm not prone to visions, but that vision was sort of snapshots of different periods in my life from the time I was very young that were traumatic incidents. And in each picture, Jesus had his armor on me. He was like, I've been with you this whole time. So for me, that was tremendously just, I weeping, I stood up, and my first thought was like, people need to know about this. I think it's when I actually experienced my call to ministry. I just didn't have the context to know that. From that point, I think one of the things that God has gifted me with is I've never had a moment of doubt. I've never had a doubt about God's existence or goodness or presence. And that, I know that that's a gift, right? That's not what generally is, people often wrestle with that. But for me, that was, I've never had that question or that doubt. Didn't mean life was always good or easy, right? Coming to faith doesn't remove you from difficulty, and we still have a lot of difficult things to walk through, but deeply aware of God's grace and goodness.
Thanks. Good question, Bob. Pam,
I hate to ask this, but
Go for it.
Can you explain why the ACNA is in the national news these days?
Pam's question, if you couldn't hear it, was, and I think well phrased, can you explain why the ACNA is in the national news these days?
Well, the short answer is there's no institution that's free of sin. So that's the short answer. What I would say is that that's probably the deepest answer. But what I would say is that one of the reasons we're in a process of changing our processes of choosing bishops, changing our processes of how complaints are handled, is because there are a couple places where it wasn't done well. And that's really it. We've had other pieces where things were done well, right? We had a bishop who was defrocked and removed just last summer because of complaints that were brought, and we dealt with that quickly and well. The problem has been that that there were issues that nobody knew about, except for one or two people. Like there were one or two bishops who actually knew the issues, and they never told anybody else. So once those things were found out, the College of Bishops has been very proactive, and we've got to set things right. And we want everything, for me, the image comes from East African Revival in Rwanda, right? We want to walk in the light. That everything that needs to be exposed will be exposed.
That's the beginning of revival.
That's the beginning of revival. So everything that needs to be exposed will be exposed. We're not going to be in a self-protect mode. Everything that needs to be protected will be protected. Right? That's been our prayer. So I would say that as I've met, we had an emergency meeting in Dallas last week for 2 days, and there is a tremendous commitment in the College of Bishops of we've got to expose, we've got to set things right. Yeah, the short answer is there were things that weren't good, or at least accusations of things that weren't good, but the worst thing was that they weren't handled appropriately, which is the egregious piece.
And I'll give just a quick summary in case anybody in the room is going, I don't know what this is about. The Washington Post, not too long ago, produced 2 articles. First is detailing credible accusations against the Archbishop of inappropriate behavior. That's a big deal. The second was an article detailing a trial of another bishop in the ACNA, and the trial has simply dragged on too long, and it has been procedurally a real mess. There's a third scandal that is kind of hovering around at the same time and brought out in some ways through the same methods about another bishop, as the bishop over the chaplains, and multiple accounts of misconduct on his part, just abuse of power. And so those are the 3 things that got surfaced. But the crisis really operates on 2 levels. One is the misbehavior of the individual. 2 is the competency of the system and the canons, that is our church laws, the competency of the systems and the canons to respond effectively to crisis when it happens. What was observed by many was that the crisis existed on both of those planes, and that's where you get real problems. Now, I will say the ACNA is an institution in its infancy. So some people are going to take the approach, I do a little bit, where I say, it's young. Yeah, it's tripping over its own feet. That's fitting. The question is, can it grow from this and learn and do differently next time? Others are a bit more scathing, and they say, yeah, but the ACNA came out of rupture and accusation of the Episcopal Church largely. They should have learned from that how to do it well the first time around. I think both have merit. So there's the summary in my words.
Yeah, I would add to that there's been a recognition that's called Title IV, which are the disciplinary canons, that it's been a recognition that the Title IV canons are woefully inadequate. And so there's been processes of changing those. They did some initial changes which were helpful. And then they've done the most recent Title IV revisions, which I think in June, if we vote them in again, they have to be voted in twice, that those will go into effect. And it actually expanded Title IV from being 4 pages to being 43 pages. And it's actually really, really good. And for provides all kinds of ways for things to be dealt with quickly and well, and so that we don't hopefully end up in the kind of things that we've ended up here.
Let's go with Carl, and then we'll do Sheila, and then we'll do Josh. Carl.
So what is the organizational structure, the College of Bishops? Are they the ones that decide? Is there somebody above the College of Bishops? And what kind of decisions does a bishop make over and above what would be made individual?
Yeah, just questions of polity. How does it all fit together here?
So, real quick, Anglican polity. Anglican polity, you have provinces, and a province is a collection of dioceses. All the provinces are actually autonomous, right? So there is no central pope figure that has authority over them. They gather together and they make decisions that are technically non-binding, right? But they, so the World Anglican Communion, right? That's what they do. Within a province, you have groups of dioceses, and in Anglicanism, there actually is no office higher than bishop. It is the highest office. So an archbishop is just a bishop who has been tasked with calling the other bishops together. But if an archbishop wanted to visit, Advent, he actually has to get my permission, because he has no authority except in his own diocese. If he wanted to preach, he'd have to get my permission, because this church is under my authority in the diocese. So when you have a college of bishops, there are, back up, there are what are called provincial canons. Like you have churches have bylaws that govern how you do things, the diocese have canons, and then the province has canons. And so those canons generally are fairly broad to allow individual dioceses to tailor things that fit to who they are. The thing that they are making not broad but very specific are the disciplinary canons. So those are binding on us, but generally speaking, the provincial canons are super broad and our diocesan canons are much more narrow. So when you have a college of bishops, they really have a couple of things. One is, what do we agree on that we can work together with and do well? The other is that often the process of canons being changed or vetted by the College of Bishops before they go to a vote of the provincial council and assembly. So there certainly is that piece. When there is discipline of a bishop, if a bishop is found guilty, the College of Bishops actually determines the punishment. But generally speaking, those are sort of their areas of authority. Just like in one sense, my authority over Advent Anglican and over Aaron is minimal in many ways. Like I can't tell Aaron, you'll be thankful for this, hey, you need to leave this church and go to another church. I don't have the authority to do that. I can't say, Aaron, I want you to preach this series. I have no authority to do that. I can't tell Aaron who he should hire or fire in his staff. I have no authority to do that.
But you can hold me accountable to the vows of my holy orders.
But I can hold him accountable.
I need to be a good priest,
Yeah.
essentially, under his oversight.
So there's a lot that I do of clergy care and all those pieces, working with vestries on strategy. I do a lot of that work. But my authority goes from 0 to 100 if there's an accusation of misconduct. Right? Then my authority in the church is super high.
Which is why on our website we have a page for reporting concerns. And one of the things it says on there is if for some reason you don't want to report that concern to the church, here is how to contact the bishop. So that's valid. That's not a, oh no, I'm going around Aaron sort of a thing. No, that's part of his job.
Yeah, and we have, on the diocese, we have a reporting page.
Even better. Thank you. I know probably that spurs some follow-up questions, so I'm going to go to Sheila and then Josh.
What I was wondering is, you said the bishop is defrocked. Does that allow him to go to another area and become a bishop there?
Isn't that a great question? Because that happens in the pastorate level all the time.
Yeah, what I would say is not as an Anglican.
Oh, no.
You have to repeat the question. Sheila's question, if you couldn't hear it, was so if a bishop is defrocked, like Ken mentioned, happened to one not so long ago, is that bishop able to go somewhere else and be a bishop there or become a bishop again there Ken's answer is not within Anglicanism.
Right.
Certainly, that person
I
can
have
go to another
defrocked
structure.
clergy before, where they are, I removed their ordination, and they're no longer Anglican clergy. They can't be Anglican clergy anywhere. I can't stop them from going across the street and joining a different denomination, right, and trying to lead, right? So that does happen.
It does. Josh, what's your question?
So it was a follow-up question from before, but are those canons that you were talking about?
Title 4.
Well,
Sorry.
not even Title 4, but
Okay.
like all of the canons that like.
Canons for the province?
Yes.
Gotcha.
province. Are those like publicly available?
Yeah.
Or also are the, I guess, the councils or the kind of like summary of like, hey, these are the meeting notes that happened during this, you know, meeting of the College of Bishops, potentially available to clergy or not?
Yeah, that's a, the first one is you can go on the ACNA website and you will find their canons, and you will find the proposed revisions, Title 4. You can go on our website, you can find our diocesan canons, you can find our policies, and all those things are.
Just like you can reach out to any vestry member and find our bylaws.
Yeah. I do know that at, I have to say this carefully. 99% of my time and energy goes to my diocese.
Thank you.
So,
I see a lot of bishops get more interested in their work in the College of Bishops.
and then the
I shouldn't
diocese
say I see a
suffers.
lot. I have seen bishops get more interested in their work at the College of Bishops level than at the diocesan level for their parishes. And I'm grateful that your focus is on the parishes.
So, my general piece has been, generally speaking, I try to not be very visible or very involved in things in the HNA level. Until like things like this that happen. And then I'm like, and I'm also a bishop for the church, so I've spent hundreds of hours on some of these issues in the last month and a half or 2 months, I guess. All that to say that I do know that at most College of Bishops meetings, there's a communique that comes out that sort of says, here's the things that we did, right? Yeah, probably not minutes, right? But here are the people we approved to become bishops, here are the topics we discussed, here are the things we agreed to, that there generally is a communique that goes out. And I am guessing there's a way you could go back and look at past ones. I just don't know, because
I think
actually
that's
don't
true.
look.
I think on the provincial website, I do think that stuff is housed past communiques. Yeah, thanks. Heather, and we'll go to Vanda.
I have another question. I think last time you came, you mentioned being closer to retirement. I think you said something about that. And wondering if you have influence on successors.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Pretty sure the answer is no.
Technically, I have no influence, right? Just like if Aaron left Advent, he has no influence, which is right, on who the next rector is.
Am I right in thinking the vestry has all authority to
Yep.
choose and hire a person?
Yep.
You
I have to
have the
approve
ability
it.
to approve, yeah.
So, but the reality is, there is a culture that Aaron has built that even if he's not directly involved in the process, has tremendous influence on who's chosen. So I would say it's the same for me. There is a culture that I've been very intentional in building in the diocese, and that culture has tremendous influence on who they're going to choose. But I am not in the process.
But that's a wonderful way to describe it. I am choosing now who my successor will be by shaping the culture and the values of the parish that will influence the choice that the people make. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Kevin.
Put some speakers on the back wall.
What's that? But yeah, what do you mean over there so that you can hear better?
In the church.
In the church.
More of a suggestion, not a question.
Wait, why? I don't understand your suggestion. Are you having trouble hearing in the sanctuary? Yeah. We have, okay, the public service announcement. Go to the sound booth and tell them I'm having trouble hearing. They have hearing assistance devices.
Work a treat.
And Jean says they work a treat. They work quite well. I've heard from a number of people that they are a game changer. So talk to a sound booth person. Guys, we are at time here. I would love to do more questions. If you have more questions, often it's around the end of the Q&A that you know what question you want to ask. The good news is when service is over, Ken is not he's not being catapulted straight to SeaTac. He'll hang here for a little while, and you'll have time to just corner him and go, wait a minute, I didn't want to ask in front of everyone, but here's my question, okay? He'll be hanging out upstairs for a while after service. At this point, though, I'm going to say, let's go to church. All right, thank you.